Hi, good evening, how are you? Okay, fantastic. A while ago, I started thinking about the sheer amount of time I spend learning various facts about various movies, and I realized that it's a lot of time. And then I thought about the amount of time I spent trying to fall asleep, and I thought it'd be pretty great if I could somehow combine the two. So that's what I'm gonna try to do today, for my sake and maybe others if others have the same idea. Now, I already know all of these facts, obviously, because, well, I'm gonna uh, tell them to you. So, well, there goes my concept. Well, the original concept at least. Um, anyway, in honor of Avengers Endgame premiering in just a couple of days at the time of this recording, I thought I'd read some fact about the one that started it all. Not Iron Man, but the first Avengers movie, simply called The Avengers, the one from 2012. You know the one, you've probably seen it, otherwise, you're probably not listening to this. It is written and directed by Joss Whedon. It has a time of 2 hours, well, runtime of 2 hours and 23 minutes, and currently has a rating of 8.1 on IMDb, which is pretty good. I don't know what the rating is on Rotten Tomatoes because I forgot to check. Terribly sorry about that. I'm basically gonna discuss mainly two facts, and then I'm gonna expand on them to the point of absolute ridiculousness. So I think it's gonna take about 40 minutes. You probably know better than I do, because, well, you can see the actual runtime of this video. So, anyway, without further ado, let's get started. Number one, Robert Downey Jr. improvised a lot during filming. He, well, didn't strictly follow the script. He sort of made it his own, which, I mean, you can imagine if you, well, know what he's like, if you watched interviews with him, if, well, you've seen the way he plays Tony Stark. So yeah, for example, he invented several of the lines that he says, many of the iconic ones, like, you know, when Thor basically steals Loki out of the jet, and he tracks him down, and while he's about to fight, he says something about, oh, what is this, Shakespeare in the Park? Does mother know you weareth her drapes? That line has gone on to become very famous and iconic, and he actually came up with that himself, so that wasn't in the script, which is kind of interesting because, well, I mean, it's not really, if it's $1 billion blockbuster, it's not usually the kind of, well, that's not usually the kind of movie you improvise a lot of lines in. In a lot of comedy films, they improvise during filming because, well, there's always things they can change, make even funnier. Sometimes the inspiration comes to you as you go along, you know, in the process. And yeah, sometimes when they're making a more comedy-centric movie, they also improvise. So, for example, Thor Ragnarok has, well, a lot of comedy. It's pretty much a comedy movie, action comedy. And while filming that, the actors were encouraged to actually improvise. They got the outlines of what they were going to say in the scene, and then they made it their own, and so it seems more spontaneous, and they can crack jokes at a completely different rate. But I mean, when it comes to, for example, Captain America, then everything has to be very well planned out because he does not have that sense of humor, because, well, you know, it's the army and everything, you can't really do that. But then again, Robert Downey Jr. He just has that sort of arrogance, if you say that, but like it's not a bad kind of arrogance. It's just very confident, and I mean, of course, he can get away with just about anything because he is who he is. So like when at the end of the Avengers, when like the battle is over and everything, he says, "Let's not come in tomorrow. Let's just not come in tomorrow," something like that. That was also his line because he felt that the line that was in the script was too dull. It wasn't like characteristic. It wouldn't have, I don't know, brought the same sense of levity when it was actually done. Originally, the line was "What's next," which I agree isn't very fun. Then also, when they're on the helicarrier, he says, "That man is playing Galaga. He thought we wouldn't notice, but we did." Something along those lines. That was also his invention. That wasn't actually planned from the beginning, and then they actually went ahead and added Galaga to the monitor that man is using, which is kind of fun that it actually what he says actually affects how the movie comes out. I mean, it's good that they actually adapt after what happens during filming. Sometimes they don't do that. A prime example of that is X-Men, specifically X-Men First Class and then X-Men Days of Future Past. Because, well, in X-Men First Class, Hugh Jackman makes a small cameo as Wolverine. We all know the one. We all know the scene. It's where Professor X and Magneto, or well, Charles Xavier and Eric Lancher, are trying to recruit mutants to like I don't remember the purpose of it, but they're recruiting mutants to like fight back against Sebastian Shaw, I think the villain is called, and Wolverine being Wolverine, he doesn't want to join them, so he tells them to go, flip themselves. I'm gonna keep it PG here, even though I really like the line because, well, I'm vulgar, but well, that's his exact wording. Go F yourselves. But originally the line was going to be just F off. Yeah, it sounds ridiculous when you try to censor it, but that's what it was supposed to be. But after a few takes, Hugh Jackman changed it to go F yourselves, and that worked much better, and that's the one they kept in the film. And then 3 years later, in Days of Future Past, well, when they made Days of Future Past 3 years later, Professor X says this line back to him. He quotes Wolverine back to Wolverine, but then he says like, "I'll tell you what you told me back then," and then he says F off instead of go F yourself, and I don't know why they couldn't just change that. Anyway, that was a huge emphasis. And then also the famous shawarma scene, the post-credit scene, where they just sit in a shawarma restaurant eating shawarma, all the Avengers, after the battle. That's also because Robert Downey Jr. just happened to come up with the line about shawarma. Has anyone tried shawarma? Never had it, but I want to try it. He said something like that, and they just took that and rolled with it. So the day after the world premiere of the Avengers, they filmed that scene. So that was actually done way after everything else, when everyone just happened to be, all the actors happened to be in the same city at the same time. Which, is also kind of interesting. I say that a lot because that's the whole point of this video, I guess. They all had like different things to do, but they were in town for just like that day, and an interesting fact about that is that Chris Evans had already signed on to appear in Snowpiercer, which is another film, obviously. And so contractually, he wasn't allowed to shave his beard that he had grown out for the movie. And, well, up until Infinity War, Captain America doesn't have a beard. So what they did to disguise his beard was they added a prosthetic jaw, which apparently looked terrible. And his, well, it didn't look natural, and also he's covering it with his fist. So he couldn't talk, he couldn't eat, so he's just sitting there. And apparently had a wig too. I'm not, yeah, it doesn't affect much. I mean, it's just a couple of seconds. It's just one shot, and it's a hilarious scene. So yeah, I'm not sure why any of that's relevant. But anyway, that's the story behind the shawarma scene. It was just because Robert Downey Jr. got inspired, and also in the film, in the Avengers, you can see Iron Man crashing down on the ground in front of a shawarma restaurant. So presumably that's where Iron Man, that's where Tony Stark got the idea in the movie continuity. And also during filming, Robert Downey Jr. kept food hidden all over like sets and stuff. So often when he's eating something, that's not part of the script. It's just him being, himself and the character of Tony Stark. So it's just hungry, going around snacking a little bit, and they just let it be in the movie because, well, that's the kind of, well, that's the way he embodies the character, which is pretty cool, I think. And then here's where it gets interesting. Finally, right? In Iron Man, the first Iron Man from 2008, the film ends with him saying, "I am Iron Man," to the press, so everyone finds out that Tony Stark actually is Iron Man. And I mean, it's one of the most famous lines in any superhero movie, I'd almost be willing to argue. But I've heard somewhere, I'm not sure if that's actually true, but I'm pretty sure it is, that he improvised that too, or he wrote that line. And I think that's really fascinating, because if he hadn't said that, then that would have fundamentally changed Tony Stark as a character, because like it's all part of who he is and how he is as a hero and as a person throughout the MCU, that he actually has a public identity and he isn't afraid to divulge that sort of information. And it really would have been so different if he tried to keep it a secret. If he were like Batman or Superman or Spider-Man, who all they have. It's very important for them to have a secret identity. The main reason for that is usually that they want to protect the people that they love. Like if Spider-Man Peter Parker wants to protect his aunt, Aunt May, and Clark Kent wants to protect his parents, Jonathan and Martha Kent. So if anyone were to find out that Clark Kent is Superman, they could come after his parents in Smallville, because while he is bulletproof and everything and basically invincible, they certainly aren't. And that's why, it's wise to have a secret identity. But Tony Stark doesn't do that. And that's where he differs from Batman, because they are very similar. They're both billionaires. They're both billionaire orphans who fight crime. Then, of course, the way they do it is very different, because while Iron Man is more of a, superhero, is more of a police officer, you could almost say. He's almost like part of the army. in the beginning of Iron Man 2, they have this whole debate about whether the Iron Man suit should be considered a weapon, because, well, he's the only one who owns it. It's a highly destructive device, and he used it to actually destroy. I mean, Jesus, in Iron Man 1, he blows up an entire tank with a tiny missile. And of course they want to keep that in control, you know. Want to make sure he doesn't go off the handle and start, I don't know, terrorizing people and places. And that's how the whole plot of Civil War comes into play, you know, how it develops, because they want him to, they want all of the Avengers to sign a contract that allows the army to keep track of them. It means they're working for the government, and so that they can minimize civilian casualties is the general idea of it. Tony Stark, he agrees to sign that. Captain America doesn't, and then, you know, Civil War. But what was my point about that? Right, the difference with Batman, because Batman is a vigilante. Yeah, he's a vigilante. He basically breaks the law to uphold the law. That's his shtick, you know. That's how he works. He breaks into places. He skulks around in the night, beats people up in a way that Tony Stark doesn't really do. So yeah, like I said, it's more related to the army, and Batman has to stay private. So it wouldn't be very good for Bruce Wayne to reveal his identity, because why? Sure, his money and everything can protect the people he loves, which is pretty much just Alfred to begin with. Then I guess as the Bat family grows, there are more people to protect, but still they can protect themselves. So it's mostly like to, stay out of legal issues, which, I mean, I would imagine Iron Man also has to some extent, because, I mean, what he does, like I said, is highly destructive, and should probably be considered, I don't know, acts of terrorism or just violence sometimes, but he has some sort of permit that allows him to do it, and if he didn't have a public identity, that would be very different. I mean, that whole thing, like the legal part of it, because then there would just be this man in a red and gold suit flying around, stopping terrorists and stuff, and nobody would know who it was, except that they probably would, since, I mean, it's a gold titanium alloy suit flying around with jetpacks and shooting, not lasers, I don't know if they're ion cannons or photon blasters or whatever the term they use is, that would be quite confusing in that case. So the whole point of this entire monologue was that apparently he improvised the "I am Iron Man" line, and I'm having a hard time believing that he actually just was able to improvise that, because still it changes so much. It would have changed the entire MCU to the very core, and the entire way Iron Man is portrayed, the way the Avengers operate. So it must have been planned to some extent. But, you know, I don't know. I don't have all the facts. This is just my thoughts, and I'm trying to bore you to sleep with them. And hopefully and probably I'm succeeding. But I think that's enough about that. Let's move on to number 2. Mark Ruffalo replaces Edward Norton in the role as Bruce Banner, aka the Incredible Hulk. So let's talk a little bit about that for, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, maybe 4 hours. We'll just see what happens. So in the film The Incredible Hulk from 2008, Bruce Banner is played by Edward Norton. Now, an interesting fact about this is that the director, Louis Leterrier, I think, well, I know that's what it's called, I just don't know how it's pronounced exactly. He actually was kind of keen on having Mark Ruffalo play Bruce Banner, but then the role went to Edward Norton. I'm not really sure why that was. I can imagine it's because Edward Norton is more kind of a high-profile name than Mark Ruffalo. He's done more iconic roles, like he's one of the main characters in Fight Club, and that's like, I don't know, the 10th most popular film of all time according to IMDb users. So I'd imagine it's that, and also he's more used to playing the lead character in movies than Mark Ruffalo is. He doesn't really do lead roles. I'm not sure he ever has actually been the main character in a whole film. I mean, he's been certainly important characters in a lot of films, but not really the character that the whole story revolves around. He has, in fact, been nominated for 3 Oscars, Mark Ruffalo, and all of those were for Best Supporting Actor. And I mean, he does those roles very well, but we haven't really seen him carry a whole blockbuster himself. I mean, it's the first time for everything. But The Incredible Hulk wasn't it for him. And also, I'm not sure Mark Ruffalo would have fit in the sort of tone that The Incredible Hulk has. It sort of is much darker than many of the other MCU films. So, like, if you compare it to Thor Ragnarok, where Mark Ruffalo does play the Hulk and Bruce Banner, you can't really imagine that they're actually in the same cinematic universe, because they're so different. The Incredible Hulk, very dark, then, I don't know, Thor Ragnarok and all the rest, much brighter, just in general. We'll get to that later. I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that. Then also one of the reasons that, the main reason, I suppose, that Mark Ruffalo replaced Edward Norton is that the negotiations failed, basically. He was about to reprise his role for the Avengers, Edward Norton, but then he didn't, because of, creative differences, as usual. During The Incredible Hulk, while filming that, there were creative differences back then as well, already. Like, I don't think Edward Norton had a very positive experience working with Marvel, and they didn't really have a positive experience working with him. I've read that he rewrote like most of the script for The Incredible Hulk. He did his own version of it, which, I mean, sure, trying to contribute to the project, there's nothing wrong about that. I suppose I'm not sure how the director, how Louis Leterrier, wanted to make the film, if he was very set on doing it his way, or if he was actually open to like feedback from the actors. But either way, Norton tried to do his own thing, and I'm pretty sure they didn't always agree 100%. Sometimes their ideas would clash, and it wouldn't really work out. But I mean, it's a movie at least. It's not very good, and I'm not sure if that's because of that or just different creative decisions, other creative decisions. Yeah, that's basically the story of the professional relationship between Marvel and Edward Norton. Then also one factor was that Edward Norton didn't really like the character of Bruce Banner in the Avengers, because at the end of The Incredible Hulk, that whole film basically is about Bruce Banner trying to sort of come to terms with the Hulk and find a way to control his emotions and try to keeping that part of himself contained so that he doesn't explode and kill a bunch of people and destroy whole cities, which is basically what he does anyway. What he accidentally does throughout the film, but then in the very end of the movie, at the very end, the very last scene, we can see him sitting in a little cabin meditating, and then he's like found a way to actually control his anger, his emotions, his blood pressure. I think that's one of the major factors. And then in the Avengers, that's apparently a problem once more. So it's like that all that progress that he made in The Incredible Hulk had been undone, and Edward Norton wasn't very happy about that. Which I can understand. It's never good when they sort of retcon an entire creative decisions that were made in a prequel. Still, I think it's not that bad in the Avengers, because we can see that he actually has sort of a handle on himself, and his being the Hulk and all that whole part of himself. So for example, when Tony Stark pokes him with like a sharp object, he says that I wouldn't be here if I hadn't learned to control his fear of sharp objects, if he couldn't handle being poked, basically, which he knows what's best. He knows what he can and can't do and shouldn't do. So I think he has sort of he's a very intelligent person, so he does make he makes intelligent decisions about what he should do to keep the Hulk controlled, contained, and like I said, he takes precautions and everything. And then at the Battle of New York, he says that thing, Captain America says, Mr. Banner, I think now would be a good time for you to get angry. And he says, that's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry. And then he just becomes the Hulk on command. Which, it's a pretty cool scene. And it's that proves that he was actually able to control it. So it wasn't all, the whole progress wasn't completely retconned. But still, I'm not gonna complain about any of that, because I'm actually glad that Mark Ruffalo plays Bruce Banner and not Edward Norton. I really like Edward Norton as an actor. I think he's terrific. I just think Mark Ruffalo fits better in the MCU. He has more of that, I don't know, that kind of levity to his performance and to his character. Continuing on the topic of the Incredible Hulk, it's also worth mentioning that, I mean, just about nothing remains from that film. Like I said earlier, it has a very different tone. It's so much darker, and still, that was when the MCU was very new. I mean, it was the second film. It came out the same year as Iron Man, which started the whole MCU. But still, it's so much darker than, well, pretty much all of the MCU films. It's more not just the actual lighting. I mean, it's pretty gloomy, all of it. The colors are dark, the whole palette, it's raining a lot. It's not this bright and comic booky colors that you see in the rest of the films. Yeah, I mean, it's more kind of like the Netflix TV shows in that sense. Yeah, a very different tone, so it's understandable. It's very easy to just disregard it as an MCU film. One detail that has remained is General Thaddeus Ross. General Ross, what is it called? Thunderbolt Ross. He appeared in both Civil War and Infinity War, both Civil and Infinity War, and played by the same actor as well. I think it's William Hurt, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he appears in both Civil War and Infinity War. He doesn't have he's not a main character in any of them. Well, I mean, obviously he's not a main character, but he doesn't have a very big role in either of them. In Infinity War, it's pretty much just a cameo. But still, he's pretty much the only character from the Incredible Hulk that has been seen since then, except for Bruce Banner, but he's played by a different actor. So, yeah. Then also, I think he's like the Secretary of Defense, so I guess it makes sense that he's actually shows up. His daughter, Betty Ross, who is Bruce Banner's love interest in The Incredible Hulk, and in the comics too, I think. She hasn't appeared since The Incredible Hulk, and they haven't really mentioned that or anything. Bruce Banner moved on to date Black Widow, if you can call it that. He, I don't know, they shared a kiss once, and that was not one of the interesting parts about Age of Ultron. But, that happened. One interesting part that sort of remains is that in the Avengers, which I kind of forget that it's actually the film we're talking about. In the Avengers, Bruce Banner references a suicide attempt. He tried to take his own life. He said that he put a bullet in his mouth and the other guy spit it right out. And apparently that's a deleted scene from The Incredible Hulk, where he's in Alaska somewhere, I suppose far from civilization, which is, a very wise decision. And he tries to kill himself. And apparently you can also see him spitting out the bullet, spitting the bullet out in the opening of the video game for The Incredible Hulk, which I'm willing to bet no one has played. Another fun fact about The Incredible Hulk is, another fun fact, the suicide fact was actually fun. No, suicide is not fun. Tony Stark actually appears in The Incredible Hulk, and not many people remember that, but that's actually true. He appears in I think, I don't know if there are several post-credit scenes, or if it's even a post-credit scene, he appears at the end, talking to General Ross about recruiting, I think, the Abomination for the Avengers initiative. Which, I mean, thank God they didn't do that. Even Blonsky, he's the villain of the Incredible Hulk. That would have been terrible. But, well, they go on to recruit Bruce Banner instead. Yeah, that's basically everything I have to say about that fact. So, those are 2 facts about the Avengers. I hope it bored you to sleep. I could have talked a heck of a lot more about this film because there's so much to say. But I thought it would be more interesting to just take 2 random facts and really delve into them. Because, I mean, I could read lots of facts just from like a piece of paper, but I think that would be way too interesting. And the point of this is sort of to bore you to sleep. So I have no regrets. Anyway, that's going to be the end of this video. If you made it this far, it obviously wasn't a very successful video, because the point of it was to make you fall asleep or just get tired and turn it off. But either way, I will hopefully see you some other time with maybe more trivia about the Avengers or another Avengers movie like Age of Ultron or Infinity War or Endgame when that comes out. I'll probably be back with some facts about Star Wars in honor of the Episode 9 trailer dropping a while ago at the time of this recording, of course. So I guess I'll see you then. Well, probably not. But anyway, sleep tight and bye-bye.